Our conversation today is about Irish history. They're going into a play that takes place right after World War I in Ireland. What would you say to them would be important information to know?
Ireland has struggled for independence from England and then Britain since 1169. A lot of the conflict is attributed now to sectarianism, but it wasn't always that way. English people were Catholic and Irish people were Catholic. Everyone was Catholic. But since the schism in Western Christianity, it's become a part of the conflict. So that's one thing I would ask people to bear in mind. So you fast forward and you add on things like the potato famine in the mid-1800s. At the late 1800s was a birth of Irish nationalism, the Irish language. You probably see a lot of talk and rallies and meetings and discussions, people haranguing the crowd about the virtues of Irishness and the liabilities that come from being part of the British Empire. And I think that was going on in the early 1900s before the Easter Uprising. And the Easter Uprising just meant it went underground, but it didn't go away. That was where the Irish War of Independence started, 1919, 1922, where the IRA fought a dirty war. You go out and you attack an isolated police station out in the boonies and take the weapons from the police and use them for yourself, and use those weapons to go to the next police station and attack that one and take those weapons. They started fighting a guerrilla conflict, and eventually it got to the point where the English said, you know what, it's just not worth fighting to keep Ireland. Let's find some kind of an agreement. Michael Collins was one of the negotiators, and they sent Collins to England to negotiate, and he agreed to the creation of the Irish Free State, the current setup, the boundaries between Northern Ireland and Ireland proper. Ireland got their independence not in one, like America, one declaration, 4th of July, 1776, we're independent of England. In Ireland, it was a series of steps. Yeah, it wasn't until after World War II that they formally completely separate the ties. There's a different way to pursue independence, I think. The Irish were ultimately successful, even though it came at a moral cost. If ever there was an example of how not to live, the Lord's injunction to turn the other cheek, it's Ireland. It's just going on forever, and everyone got poorer, and everyone got, sadder because of it, as opposed to just turn the other cheek and get on with your life. So there was also a lot of missteps, frankly, on both sides. This spiral of violence. So one side would commit an atrocity against the other, so the other side feels they have to commit an atrocity to even the score. The Black and Tan, it was a paramilitary organization with British government recognition that fought against Irish Republican Army. Some in Ireland call the 1919 to 1922 war the Black and Tan War. I'll give you an example. In Black and Tans, they knew who Michael Collins was, and they wanted to get him. And since they couldn't get him, they went to his family's farm and they burned it to the ground. But that's the kind of retributions that the Black and Tans would do. Now, I'm not going to cast all the blame on the Black and Tans, because the IRA would play really rough as well and do some things that shouldn't have been done. Executing of people that are basically prisoners in front of their families because that's where they caught them. So both sides were doing it, but the Black and Tans had a pretty bad reputation. And also, I think there's a concept of Christian just war. Under what circumstances is it ethical for a Christian or a Christian country to engage in war? And what ways can you fight that are consistent with their ethical and you don't taint yourself, that are compliant with Christian beliefs? And part of that's just humanitarianism, and I'm sure that there were hospitals that treated captured German soldiers, and it doesn't mean you love Germany by going to treat wounded soldiers. It just means that there are men who are wounded and they need care.